4 continents, 20 nations, different species, and a world where magic exists. After the era of legends and swords, the current Rondel that has extremely developed magic is called the Age of Magic. However, opposing the highly developed magical civilization, the political system is still feudal with kings and nobles. Classism still exists, yet the current Age of Magic is called the Golden Age of Rondel. Along with that, on 29th of December 1999, the day before the arrival of the new century, the will of an Archmage was revealed and the entire world turned upside down. The Archmage announced that he has hidden everything he has somewhere in this world. Those who desire can find and take the ownerless fate. The wizard who left behind this was a pioneer who led Rondel into the golden age of the magic century, was Manuel Lucas. He told everyone that they can possess Archmage Lucas' fate, after which everyone who wanted to find Lucas' fate began their adventure. Many rumors around it started to spread, and regardless of nationality, species, or rank, everyone stepped up to find his fate. But rumors are just rumors, and no one was able to find it anywhere, and even though many people investigated it, no one was able to find a single clue related to it, and 20 years passed just like that before a screen appears in front of a boy telling him that he has acquired Manuel Lucas' fate. In 2007 of the magical age century at Lawrence Castle, a servant asks Adrian if he's going to the study again, which he agrees to, and says he's going to put back all the books he read. The servant says he could do it for him, but he tells him that he has to get some others' books as well for him. As he's going, he explains that he's a reincarnator who remembers his previous life, and nothing noteworthy happened in the final moments of his previous life. He died in a truck rollover accident while serving in the military, with just 1 month left from being discharged. And when he opened his eyes, he was transported to the Reinhardt Kingdom from South Korea. From Kim Mingi to Adrian Lawrence, from an ordinary middle-class family to being the second son of a Viscount family who owns an estate. Although he was distressed during the beginning of his reincarnation, his past experiences turned out to be a huge advantage in this new life. When children around his age were playing around without a care in the world, he buried himself in learning earlier than others and was able to successfully receive recognition from those around him and fulfill his father's expectations all at once. But if he had to pick out one disappointing thing, Rondel was a world with a more advanced civilization than 21st century Earth, and because of that, the knowledge he carried over from his previous world wasn't of much help. So what he could do in that situation is to continuously strive to increase his value and keep acting like a genius. However, life isn't easy enough to be navigated through with effort alone, because he had been attempted to poison when he was 7 years old, and the doctor had said that they were really fortunate because he would have died if they had taken action even a little bit later. The culprit was obvious, as Anna Lawrence, the official wife of the Lawrence family, bowed over him, worriedly remarking that she was really worried and asking if he was alright. To that woman who was of high birth, the fact that he who was of common birth had been the one who caught his father's eyes was enough to make her worried. He tried convincing him of her true intentions but was unable to, after which he realized that he's turning a blind eye and acting dumb despite knowing the truth. After that, he stopped acting like a genius. Now being 20 years old, he visits a convenience store where the cashiers mutter among themselves about him being one of the lords of the area, but still wearing such casual outfits. He goes to the buyer and buys all the Chronicle online point cards, as the cashier angrily tells off a newbie gossiping about him and tells him he'll lose the noble's favor and get punished, as Adrian goes to his attendance. The newbie asks if he comes here often, to which she replies that he comes twice or thrice a month and is into games a lot from the looks of it. Adrian looks at his bag and remarks that it's 5 million loot worth of game point cards and would be around 5 million won in Korean currency, before an attendant tells him that they received a report that the young master Cedric is visiting his residence. He quickly arrives at his house and mother, where his half-brother Cedric asks if he's in his right mind and why he's walking around the estate without a vehicle and should think about the family's image as the child of a noble. He decides to just withdraw, or else it'll go on even longer. He apologizes for being short-sighted and asks why he's here, to which he answers that their father is going to make him take over the business hearing, which Adrian remarks that Rondel's nobles' families are a powerful combination of conglomerates and politicians, which is why these nobles are involved in different businesses, and Far's distribution is the money source from the mining industry, and now knows the reason why he's here, before telling him that he'll refuse and to now return since he paid a lot of money to play games, hearing which Cedric menacingly laughs and says he should stick to that. His mother asks if he's alright, which he agrees to and says it's best to not get involved, explaining that he abandoned his image of being a genius after the poisoning incident and isolated himself by minimizing his interactions, and maybe it's because his father wasn't interested in a son of a concubine who wasn't a genius and became indifferent to him, thanks to which his life never got in danger again. He lived like that for 10 years after that and left the castle with his mother as soon as he graduated and couldn't even recklessly open his mouth there. Entering his room, he boots up a game and accesses Chronicle Online, saying you should monitor something in the virtual world, as well as a screen says that abilities in Chronicle Online reflect in reality. 10 years ago, when he was enrolled at the Royal Academy, he researched Manuel Lucas for an assignment and discovered something he had never expected, which was that Lucas's crest, no matter how he sees it, is an English word. Why? Shocked, he wondered how English could exist in this world and questioned if Lucas was him too. After being convinced, he investigated Manuel Lucas more and more, and proof that he really was an earthling poured from everywhere, so he utilized his knowledge from the past worlds to look for the fate he had left, and in the end, he finally did it. He exclaims that he can just walk on a path of flowers now is what he thought before being attacked. Taking out his dagger, he annoyingly says it hurts and remarks that his suffering truly began after getting his hands on fate. He questions if he can fight this properly out of fear and lands a critical hit, reaching level 10. Getting transported, he finally reaches Season 1 and says it took longer than expected because of synchronization before a screen asks if he wants to go up to the second floor of the magical tower of Manuel Lucas, which he decides to do so and says the real value of fate isn't money but this. Up until now, he thought the MP displayed with the HP was just mana, but he had never felt its presence in real life. As circle creation is completed, he says he can now feel the presence of mana circulating in his chest, and that it wasn't an easy process, wondering if he can learn a technique that suits the circle created. A screen asks if he would like to look through the materials, which he remarks is really convenient since he was wondering when he'd get to look through them all. Suddenly feeling a huge headache, he says it's convenient to learn skills and magic just by touching them like in games. The process of integrating them into his brain is nothing short of awful. Getting to the last one, he sees that it's the Circle Concealment Technique book and remarks that it's just what he needs. He gets ready to acquire it, but suddenly feels a sudden pain, saying he didn't hope for anything much from Lucas's fate, and just wants him and his mother to comfortably live without any problems and is going to do everything for that. The next day in the mansion's training hall, Vice tells Adrian that he has more stamina than he thought and was a little surprised when he said he wanted to become a swordsman, to which he answers that his body feels a little heavy these days, inwardly remarking that he thought it would help him in the game if he trained in real life too, but can really feel the mana circulating in him aside from that. And it seems like the improved status in the game has a positive effect on real life as well, which means that the skills he can use in game can be implemented in real life too, and he was fortunately able to solve the problem of hiding the circle with a concealment skill he learned at Lucas Magic Tower. Seeing his face, Vice asks if something good happened, to which he happily says he received a good item in the game, seeing which the others call him pathetic and wonder why he's trying to look good in front of him. Adrian stops Vice, who angrily reacts and tells him it's fine, inwardly saying he staged this to look pathetic and avoid Cedric and Anna's eyes because being ignored as a worthless guy is the best situation for him right now. Later, as he accesses Chronicle Online again, he remarks that he's confirmed that the stats are properly reflected in real life too, so what he needs the most and the thing that will lead him to more money and abilities is to splurge, remembering how someone had said that the most powerful thing in a game is your wallet. He buys different things and said it would have been nice to do so earlier, but he needed to at least reach level 10. He sees the main event titled Summon Supporter and says an aggro will help him level up and isn't a waste of money, deciding to pick the highest ranked warrior to work as his tank, no matter how pricey it is. As he starts pulling, he says the chances are lower than bad Korean games and put in 30 million won but hasn't gotten any supporters he's like yet. Suddenly noticing a supporter named Arcia, the Heavenly Steel, he says she's the best in the unique tier and registers her, remarking that her expression looks like that of a golem, but it doesn't matter. He goes for a hunt and says it doesn't feel like a random EXP loss at all, although it's a pity that it's proportional to the level. Noticing a screen saying he's been playing for 15 hours and asking him to take a break, he logs out and tiredly yawns, saying that today was rewarding before deciding to go to the training hall for a short break, but suddenly seeing Arcia standing beside him. He asks Arcia who she is, to which she answers that she's his support. He says he's asking how she came out of the game, to so she remarks that he must be curious about how she's been able to maintain her form in reality, which he agrees to, inwardly saying that the fact that she can differentiate between the game and real life means she properly understands her situation. She says she's a homunculus whose creator is Sir Manuel Lucas and as determined by him. Her appearance and characteristics are that of Arcia's and is one of Lucas's legends, in other words, hearing which he resignedly remarks that he wouldn't have chosen this tank of a supporter if he had known that this would happen. He asks if her stats are the same as in the game, and she says the restricted stats will be recovered as he levels up in Chronicle Online. Functionally, they're comparable to the Grand Master, which surprises him as he remarks that the Grand Master is on the same rank as an 8th Circle Mage and on par with the continent's strongest, because even in the kingdom, the highest rank of mages is the 7th class, and there are only 8 8th-class mages in the whole world, wondering how Manuel Lucas was able to create a mage of that level, but dismissing it since it's helpful to have a trustworthy and incredibly strong ally around, although the only problem is how he's supposed to hide her. He asks where she was before, to which she tells him that she was stored in a standby state in a maintenance warehouse located in a holy city named Everhill, and was then transmitted by the Lucky Encounter magic server, which is only possible at the time of the initial shipment, after which she has to manually return if she wants to go back to the warehouse. He asks if there is a stealth or magic concealment option, and she answers that mana concealment is possible, but stealth is not an option because she is of the warrior class. He asks her to try it, but it doesn't work, to which he remarks that it can't be helped since people's impression of him is the worst anyway. Later, the people around them gossip that Adrian's openly inviting a woman to the mansion who follows him around everywhere. As he reaches level 30, he remarks that no one will suspect him if he plays the role of an immature guy who invited a woman to his house. He asks Arcia what happens to her real-life body when she's connected to the game. She answers that it'll be on eco mode, that is like her taking a break, but will always be on standby for his protection. He asks if that means she can immediately alert him if there's a problem outside, which she agrees to before a large monster named the Orc Warrior Cants appears in front of them. As the orc rushes at them, Adrian uses his magic missile to land a critical hit and remarks that its power has surpassed that of the first circles thanks to him, covering his entire body with high-level equipment before the orc suddenly attacks, seeing which he says it was still critically hit Eve with its absurd HP, and that he'll die even if he gets hit once, and is glad Arcia is with him, although he's still nervous seeing that powerful of an enemy charging in with so much force and already died once. He uses earth magic and says he won't let his fear cloud his judgment at this level, telling Arcia to not let it get up as he's attacking. As the orc gets down to its remaining 50 HP, Adrian says it's really persistent, and it would have been better to put the sword down and act out some ground techniques, though before using magic missile to finally defeat it as it charges at him, after which the tower's third floor opens up. Meanwhile, at Viscount Lawrence's office, Anna asks him what he's thinking and if it's because of the news that Adrian has brought a commoner woman into his house, but he takes out a letter saying he is to join the Western troops with 5 vanguards, 50 knights, and 1,000 soldiers. Shocked, she asks him to send Adrian since he's playing games all the time, to which he agrees, but once Adrian's returned, he will be made completely independent and both him and his mother, Sylvia, will not be put into any more danger. As Adrian's practicing, Vice compliments him for how good he's gotten, which he inwardly contributes to the game before an attendant arrives and tells him that his lordship has summoned him. At the Lawrence castle, Adrian wonders why they called for him as Cedric asks Raymond why Adrian's representing the family on the battlefield, to which he answers that he's the sole heir of the family and thus cannot be exposed to the high levels of danger on the battlefield, to which Sylvia asks if Adrian is not as precious as him, and he answers that there's a difference between the values of the two, which Adrian inwardly remarks is really pissing him off, but isn't a bad thing for him either, since he can be out of Anna's watch. Once he gets out, he tells Raymond that he understands and will perform his duty on the battlefield, to which Cedric says he won't say anything since this is father's decision, but won't sit back if he defames the family, to which Adrian questions if that's really what he's saying to his younger brother who's going to war for the family, and why he's so immature despite his age, before saying that they just went too easy on him. Raymond gets up from his desk and asks if they can talk for a second as they enter a room. Adrian sees that he told the guard to leave and wonders what he wants to say before posing the question to Raymond, who says he'll relocate him and Sylvia to King's Land if this incident goes well as a reward, making it so they'll be able to do whatever they want without anyone's interference. Adrian wonders how that's going to work when Anna hates it if she gets out of her sight, and tells him that he'll think about it. Raymond says it looks like he doesn't trust him, and he answers that it seems like he has to return from the battlefield alive for that to happen, which he answers is right, and gives him 2 rings, saying they're artifacts with 5th class auto shields and 7th class great shields, which will be helpful in battle. Seeing them, he remarks that these are really valuable before turning around to see Anna and Cedric watching and remarking that they were obviously doing that, as Raymond tells him to not worry about Sylvia hearing, which he says his response when he was poisoned at the age of 7 was disappointing and disappointed him multiple times afterward, but the only person he can trust right now is him. Later in his office, Raymond suddenly uses pain mitigation and gets up, saying he knew that boy had been acting since the poisoning incident, while Adrian tries to console Sylvia and tells her to not worry, but she asks about what if they hurt him after bringing him to the battle, so he says that's good for him, since the more crimes they've done, the easier it'll be to get rid of them. She asks what he means, so he tells her to not worry since Arcia is at the door, and says he's not just taking hits anymore, asking her to please wait a little more since it's almost over. 2 days later, on the Lawrence Army's dispatch day, the attendant Harmon asks Adrian about Arcia, saying he'd heard of their relationship, that they're heading to the battlefield, so he's not very sure about bringing a lover into battle, but he tells him to not think more about it, inwardly remarking that she'll save him with her life if need be, especially because she leveled up so much and her stats are close to those of an official knight, because one thing to prepare for before the battle is enhancing his chances for survival. As the 3 expensive bottles of elixirs are sitting nicely in his dimension pocket, he says he can't waste more time and tells everyone that he'll head to his room to play games, asking if there's a problem seeing which of Vanguard. Dalton says the rumors were true, calling him an incompetent commander before the vice leader. Billiam apologizes on Dalton's behalf for overstepping, saying that long travels require a slideshow and that there's no reason for the Lord's underling to care about an underling's opinions, hearing which Adrian looks at the cold look in his eyes and remarks that he doesn't like him as well for sure, but it's nothing since he's used to this stuff, so he leaves, telling them to send him a message when they arrive. In-game, Adrian uses the Tears of Salamander to swiftly incinerate a monster, saying that it's really overpriced, but he'll happily take it every day for the 3,000 damage it provides with no casts. He finally reaches level 80 and is teleported to the secret room, which he says is the 4th level quest, and faces the Demi-Lich Immerse, saying that he has to clear this quest before they arrive at the western headquarters. Seeing the monster, Adrian says liches are very difficult to deal with normally, but this one just seems stupid and slow. The Lich suddenly attacks them with 2 spells, to which Adrian wonders if it cast them before they got into their stances, and looks at Arcia from the corner of his eye, saying she's late and he needs to dodge, but still getting hit. As he's lying on the floor, he remarks that he can't think straight because of the pain and its annoying laughter, which he feels like he's heard somewhere, remembering Cedric before running towards it and telling Arcia to not give it time to cast and using heal, remarking that the best way to go against a Lich without a priest is to physically beat it up with a holy attribute, which the Lich angrily asks why they're doing before distancing himself and saying they can't do anything now, but Adrian rushes through the fire it casted around it and smacks it straight in the face. Once they've defeated it, he suddenly feels the pain, remarking that they say it's held at bay during the battle but gets unleashed as soon as the battle ends. Arcia takes out the elixirs and feeds him, seeing which he says she opened it without her master's will and that she really is special. He thanks her and says he feels much better as Lucas's 5th floor gets unlocked and they get teleported there. He runs towards the chest and gets ready to see what the rewards of this time before acquiring 500 billion loot and all-round glasses, which he looks at confusingly and says can't be an accident since it's from Lucas. He opens the menu to look at its properties and finds out that he can see who are his allies and enemies from a distance, which is useful since he's a really doubtful person. Meanwhile, in the West headquarters, the people remark that they thought the bigger son who got everyone's attention from a young age because of his talent would come from the Lawrence family, and that the one here is probably the younger son who turned into a fool after eating some poison, which Adrian brightly agrees to, after which the man says the rumors must be false after all because he doesn't really see a fool. A man introduces himself as Viscount Evans, the local headquarters chief of staff, and the other one as Viscount Miller, who is the support chief of staff. Evans looks up Adrian's Viscount troops and says they don't have to report the soldiers since the war will just end with the vanguards, to which Adrian explains that vanguards are monsters who can only be dealt with by mages of 7th circle or above, but what he's saying is all true, remembering how Archduke Lucas was the one who created the vanguard system. He goes out to the troops and tells them that Lawrence's army has been organized as the 2nd Independent Brigade and that they're going to move. A week later, Adrian happily says Earl Otis is the best since the best commander is an absent one. His actions were absurd but good for him because it allowed him to play the game without any concerns. Arcia suddenly stops hunting monsters and tells him that someone has entered the room, after which he quickly ends the game and returns to reality, where Arcia grabs Dalton's hand as Adrian wonders why he's here and sees that his status is horny. Adrian says he better explain to him about what he's going to do, so he says he was concerned about his health as a guard since he's been in the game for so long. Then this girl came to him. Adrian says he told them to message him if something happens, and he always has Arcia beside him on standby, before asking why he came into the commander of the brigade and the Lord Deputy's room without permission and if he intended to assassinate him. Dalton says he's the vanguard and asks who he thinks he is, so Adrian tells Arcia to explain exactly what happened, after which she says he tried to separate her from him, so Adrian answers that he violated military discipline or committed mutiny, which is why he needs to be given suitable punishment. He tells Dalton to come one step forward, inwardly saying that he kept it down because he was a good person and wanted to stay alive, but here he has no reason to back down and has a great time to show them, telling him to step forward. An attendant hurriedly tells Billiam that the brigadier has called for him and is going to execute Sir Dalton, hearing which he remarks that this clown is ordering him around. Upon arriving, he dodges a knife thrust at him and sees that it's bloody, as Adrian angrily says he told him to hurry. Seeing Dalton cowering on the ground, Billiam asks what's happening, so he answers that a knight harassing a girl doesn't make sense to him and asks if it does to Billiam, who angrily asks the knights what they have done and apologizes to Adrian, telling him that he'll relieve Sir Dalton of duty and will send him to jail along with the other 3 knights that were accomplices in letting him in, after which Adrian says he's moving to the next room and tells him to get the servants to clean this one up. As he's leaving, Adrian says that's his true nature, so it must have been hard pressing it down. As Adrian and Arcia are battling in the game, he remarks that the enemy is targeting his blind spots while keeping its distance before the corrupted knight Zenit instantly rushes in and targets his neck with its sword. But he quickly dodges the attack before Arcia smacks him aside with her shield and they successfully defeat it. Seeing which Zenit remarks that he's just a tool for them to grow, the 6th floor of Manuel Lucas's tower gets unlocked and gives them 2 trillion loots before giving them a handful of Istra equipment. Seeing which he says he can only use the robe and staff because everything else is for Arcia. Since it's always good to have more gear, he suddenly realizes something before being drawn back to reality as a knight says he felt some strange energy in his room. He answers that he was just checking some artifacts, seeing which the knight leaves. Adrian continues and sees that he received a force sword that vanguards only use mainly, but anyone can wield it if you charge it with aura like a battery, explaining that vanguard's force equipment are for amplifying a knight's aura, which can't be artificially created. Taking out the staff and staff, he admires it in surprise and remarks that he can see why everyone wants Archduke Lucas's fate. Later, he says it's been 2 weeks since he was appointed as the head of the Lawrence family and led the army at the front lines against the Croatian Empire. The atmosphere, which made one feel like a war could break out any second, has loosened considerably, and they've just been sitting here. Although everyone seems to be a bit wary of him after the incident with Dalton, but the odd thing is that Billiam's attitude towards him turned friendly. Remarking that it probably doesn't matter since this means he can focus on the game without hindrance, he turns towards Arcia and notices that she's happy, wondering if that's the case because they came for a walk. Looking at it like that, he says it seems that even homunculus have emotions. He still doesn't know much about her, and though her individuality is weak, she definitely has her likes and dislikes. Looking around them, he says it's nice and sees that her status has risen to very happy, seeing which he starts snickering. As they're heading back, he says they should go on walks more often, which she stiffly agrees to, and notices a knight watching them. He asks if there's a problem, to which he anxiously asks if he'd like a drink, seeing which he realizes what's going on and asks if the pair of knights behind him made him do, inwardly saying he has no reason to partake in this. He tells him that he doesn't have any interest in this and starts leaving before asking him why he's a knight. The man says he apologizes for disrespecting him, but doesn't think this was necessary. Adrian remarks that he didn't mean it like that and opens his window, showing the name Alan Lopes. He says this is the first time he's seen someone with more than 2 high talents other than a homunculus, and has a very high aptitude for mana and rare traits, wondering why he's becoming a stooge for other knights. He apologizes and tells Alan that he would have been more successful if he became a wizard instead, before telling the other knights to stop bothering him. In his room, Adrian remarks that Alan's talent is getting wasted right now and that it'll be nice if he can get him, but has to take permission from Earl for that. He says he doesn't know how useful his high talents are, but he needs to start building his influence, and now is the best time since he's away from earldom. He puts on his glasses and says he knows what he needs to do, telling Arcia that they're going to be busy. As Alan's walking back, he remembers what Adrian said, saying he just thought he was an arrogant aristocrat, but for him to think that he should become a wizard instead of a knight. He arrives at Commander Otis' office, saying he'd always known that the rumors weren't true, but it's a bit scary to this degree. As he enters inside, he sees Adrian sitting in front of Earl Otis and wonders why he was called before Earl introduces Adrian and tells him to serve him as his new lord. In his past life, when China lost to Korea in a soccer game, a fan asked a question of why China can't unite 11 good players despite being such a prosperous country, to which he'd been told that's because the Chinese Messi or Ronaldo is probably off shoveling in a farm somewhere. Adrian says it doesn't matter how much potential one has if the system isn't able to bring out that potential, wondering how so many people got on the wrong path. Looking at Alan Lopes, Barbara Anderson, a laborer, Eric Jones, a trumpeter, Nicole Brown, a boy who got caught selling adult magazines in the army, and a maid from the neighboring army, Linda Noah. He says they all have amazing talent but picked the wrong path and have nothing to do in their lives. Linda asks if he really thinks she can become a wizard since the test showed negative, to which he answers that the equipment must have problems, seeing her menu showing very high mana, high learning ability, and high intelligence, remarking that he had to pay up 400k in bribes and even down payment, but nobody would understand his actions at the moment, so being doubtful is a given. But Barbara tells her to just follow Master's orders, having very high physical ability and high aura, seeing whom he says he came with Nicole Brown to practice the sword, but ended up a laborer and wasted his life doing so, though he seems to listen to him well. He asks if everyone's picked out their clothes since they're at the royal place 100 kilometers away from the barracks, and everyone is a bit frenzied since it's probably their first time at such a lush place. But Eric, with high administrative power, very high political power, and the trait of being a smooth talker, chooses a suit which Adrian says fits well on him, telling everyone to not worry about the price tag and to just choose whatever they like, remarking that they'll just be useless if the talent inside them isn't nurtured. They will start receiving training outside of their military bases and receive tailored education, so what they wear needs to fit their new environment. Looking at their new house, they ask if this is where they're going to stay, which he agrees to, saying the butlers and servants have already been employed, so they just need to worry about their information from now on, and will pay them all in advance right now with a monthly salary of 20 million loot and an annual salary of 240 million loot, hearing which they all passionately say they will try their absolute best to meet his expectations. He tells them that their pay will become even larger if his guts are right, and understands if their development is a bit slow, and if someone offers them a bribe to betray him, he'll offer double the amount that was offered, remarking that this palace will be occupied by people he recruited from now on, so it's his job to make this a place where talent will prosper. So it may seem like wasting money, but he's actually investing in obtaining quality human resources. Later, he wonders if he should look for something like a safety unit for his mother before Arcia suddenly grabs a suspicious-looking guy, as Adrian remarks that someone apparently found out that he was collecting ordinary people, but Cedric called him and told him to mingle with people like him, basically admitting that he's watching his every move. Adrian asks the man how he found him here and says it seems like he teleported from the royal palace without an escort, or he was pretty sure he had it detached. The man says he doesn't know what he means, so Adrian tells him that he knows he's the rat Cedric planned, asking if he'd rather die than answer his questions, as Arcia slams him down. Panicking, the man says increasing his aura isn't doing anything and wonders if she's an aura expert and if he'll die if he doesn't talk. Later, Adrian finds out that the man located him by using Cedric's rat at the teleportation office and sees that he's telling the truth. He decides to tell some lies to scare him and says he already knew about how Cedric was finding information about him, but there was something interesting. He was listening to Cedric's orders and not opposing him, and was reluctantly giving him information. The man, Bertot, says Adrian's already ready to go against Cedric and is about to ask something before Adrian asks if he wants to live and should be on his side if he does, meaning he just has to give him an update of Cedric's activities every day, which he agrees to. At the Lawrence Castle, Cedric finds out that Sir Metz is in jail for spying because of being found in Adrian's room, causing a lot of problems, to which Cedric worryingly says he has no other choice and tells him to spy on Adrian for the time being, hearing which Adrian remarks that the remaining spies were punished and imprisoned. The talent gathering is going well, and Eric and Elysia will take care of the talent gathering academy, so he has to work hard as well. He suddenly receives an alert and arrives at the division commander's fortress, where he finds out that the Croydon Sky Fortress has crossed the border, making him wonder if this was all the calm before the storm. In the meeting room, Earl Otis tells them that once the local forces have been ordered to stand by, they'll put the troops on the Leviathan train so that they can be dispatched anytime, and their eating and resting will temporarily done on it as well, hearing which Adrian inwardly remarks that he was worried Commander Otis had clocked out earlier, but he's still here. Otis tells them that spatial coordinate interference has begun throughout the entire Croydon Empire from now on, and tells them not to try teleporting because it's plain suicide, as Adrian says he's glad the Croydons attacked during the day because they would have had to plan everything without a commander if Otis wasn't present. Otis says he's going to cut all personal communication between troops except for colonels and higher ranks, so they should only use the radio to communicate from now on, hearing which Adrian says is probably targeted towards him. Otis gets up telling them to be ready at all times because this is war. Adrian reaches level 160 and questions if this is how he reaches the 6th circle, remarking that it was worth playing the game since it's important to him, even though he feels bad for the knight he put in charge. He receives 10 million loot and a new sub-supporter, Supersonic Black Eagle, which surprises him since there shouldn't be a sub-supporter, so it might be better to find more accurate information in reality rather than the game system. Logging out of the game, he sees that the eagle isn't there and goes to see if it's outside, remarking that he thought a big black eagle would just arrive out of nowhere like Arcia did and wreak havoc, before Arcia suddenly notices it and points towards it. The gigantic eagle swiftly swoops down and stops in front of Adrian before landing. He tells the knights to not harm it and says he needs to find the conditions it needs to level up like Arcia before patting it. He says he isn't sure how its attack suicide dive might be helpful, but shared vision might help since it basically means getting information at the speed of sound. The knights gather around him and ask what it is, sharply bringing Adrian back as he asks if it wants to go with him before the eagle affectionately starts nuzzling him, and he says the cheesy acting he did is going to come to bite him later. After the war started, the situation did not lead to tedious regional small-scale battles, but expanded to the entire western border, turning into an all-out war thanks to which Adrian's brigade is making a debut on the battlefield, and the communication network is turned off so he can't log into the game. A knight hurriedly informs him that Croisen's platoon of vanguards is approaching, to which he orders them to not panic and reform formations, and to tell Billiam to leer the vanguards, remarking that it feels like he can't die easily, even though it was just in the game. He suddenly notices that enemy vanguards are going to attack and orders the 2nd Battalion to deploy their energy shields, which protects the ship, but still shakes it a lot, seeing which he says this isn't just a test because of how strong an attack from that far away is, and that who's going to win is pretty obvious if there isn't any magician's 7th circle or higher. He inquires about the situation and learns that the 2nd Battalion's energy shield is dead and needs 90 seconds to recharge. He says he doesn't need to worry at the moment because he'll be 9th circle if he reaches full level, and Arcia is 8th circle. The knights thank him for his quick thinking, but he answers that his luck is extremely good, seeing that the size of their attack force isn't that different. He remarks that the problem is their fortress. They have 2 of them, but both are significantly smaller than theirs and were probably mass-produced for invasion, to which he learns that this is the first time they're being deployed. He suddenly sees that the Croisens dispatched some parts. Wondering why that happened, as the other knights joke about it, he quickly sees that the magic power is overloading and tells them to quickly send a message to the fortress, telling them that a suicide attack is imminent as a part dislodges, hits their fortress, and explodes. The fortress suddenly realizes that they're being suicide bombed and start firing anti-aircraft rounds, but Adrian realizes that it's going to crash and deploys a great shield which protects the fortress. As the smoke clears, he says they would have all been literally blown away if he hadn't used the artifact in time. He wonders what happened with the Sky Fortress, but sees that they quickly retreated, remarking that if their allied forces' Sky Fortress had crashed, the remaining forces from the enemy would have massacred them. He orders the knights to check the status of the vanguards and to take care of the soldiers, and later Earl Otis cheerily says his performance was great today and commends him for the hard work, since their damages would have been catastrophic if he hadn't noticed the self-destruction, because of which their unit was the only place that realized the abnormality beforehand and successfully protected the fortress, telling him that he'll get a pretty excellent reward since he told the local commander of how their victory was all thanks to him, hearing which Adrian remarks that Earl Otis is surprisingly genuine because many people would steal their subordinates' credit. Otis says there are some strange rumors going on about Adrian because he's heard that he has tamed a giant bird, to which he answers that it was very smart and could understand what he was saying, because of which he found it fascinating and decided to take care of it. Hearing this, a man sitting in front of him says it's probably a species called Altair from the holy city Everhill, and are rare species despite being birds that are born with a high level of mana and are said to fly at a speed of 5,000 km per hour. Once tamed, they will never betray their master and won't hesitate in giving their lives to protect them, hearing which Adrian says he's glad Archmage Lucas based it off of a real species, since if he had given him a flashy sub-supporter for no reason, people would have annoyed him by asking what it was, so it wouldn't be easy to manage. He asks Earl Otis if he can use the personal communications now that the enemy has retreated, which happily allows, telling him to consider it as his reward, to which Adrian happily remarks that he can finally access Chronicle online. 2 weeks later, Adrian addresses Billiam and tells him that he doubts they will show themselves while climbing down the mountain with lots of surveillance, and it could be a trap, telling them to start fighting at a distance while not staying too close, which they agree to, as Billiam remarks that no one would have listened to Sir Lawrence 2 weeks ago. He tells them to not blindly trust the visible signals from the radar and to follow the brigadier's instructions by keeping a distance while moving, which they agree to, as he says everyone has changed a lot. They suddenly realize that it's a trap and that they came from underground, which was the only blind spot of the radar. Billiam says he's glad they listened to the brigadier's warning and stayed on their guard, since they would have been wiped out in an instant if they'd come without a plan. As the fight continues, he says it's fortunate that they were able to avoid total annihilation, but the situation isn't looking too good. They have to wait for support while blocking attacks from the vanguards that are twice as many as their allies. It will take at least 5 minutes for reinforcements to arrive, but it's practically impossible to hold out without taking any damage. Adrian asks him to please push forward, as 10 vanguards directly under the command of Sir Earl Otis arrive behind them. Billiam wonders how they're here already, and if Adrian knew what would happen beforehand, and requested support in advance before Adrian asks Billiam if he's here to walk about and why he isn't attacking. He says the enemies have their backs towards the mountain range, to which Billiam remarks on his composed voice and says he really doesn't know who's here for a walk, as Adrian says it's not easy to get reinforcements, so they should at least take 5 units out while they're at it. In a meeting, everyone discusses how they took out 5 units under the command of Brigadier Lawrence, who's simply incredible because he not only predicted the attack but also turned the crisis into an opportunity, and while other units are currently suffering, Brigadier Lawrence's unit is stealthily making contributions, hearing which Earl Otis says he thought it was a coincidence at first, but that's no longer the case with the way things unfolded, remembering how people said that the second son of Viscount Lawrence became an idiot after overcoming a near death crisis with poison. So he was actually a sleeping dragon who had been hiding his power all the while. Otis asks if Brigadier Lawrence is the same age as Michelle, saying that he would like to bring him in if his family has given up on him. Meanwhile, Adrian replies that he does, but asks Billiam to please keep it short unless it's something important, seeing that his status changed from curiosity, vigilance to favorable anticipation, wondering if it's because he saved him in battle. Billiam asks why he's hiding his strength, saying that if Cedric became the Lord, the entire territory will be in a crisis, so he will support him with all he can if he intends to go against his brother. Adrian answers that he's thankful for his words, but will pretend he didn't hear that before leaving and inwardly remarking that he won't share the joy of defeating Anna and Cedric with anyone. Later, he receives a second-grade gold medal for his achievements, while Cedric angrily says he's getting merit that should have been his but doesn't need to worry because father will hand over the land to him soon, so why does he feel so annoyed by him? In the 7th week and 48 days since the war started, Adrian asks the vanguards to have an energy drink before they go out, which they agree to and remark that they really feel refreshed after drinking this, which another one agrees to, saying other brigades have worn out more and more as the war went on, but only theirs is lively, to which Adrian inwardly says that should obviously be the case considering how precious it is, because what they are drinking is just a diluted elixir containing 1 drop of the legendary medicine and is a bit of a waste. But he has to do this for the war to end quickly. The vanguards get ready to go scouting, so he tells them not to push themselves before a knight informs him that the division commander is looking for him. He feeds the Black Eagle Crowley as they're on their way and remarks that Earl Otis has been calling for him a lot these past few days, to which the knight answers that that must mean he trusts him a lot, to which he remarks that even if he finds it bothersome to keep getting summoned by an aristocrat, there isn't really anything he can do. Upon arriving, he sees that the other unit commanders are also there and wonders if Earl summoned all the high-ranking commanders in the division, since he could have sent him a message instead, if it's something related to the battle, or if he has something he wants to publicly announce before Earl merrily welcomes them all and says they won't have to hear the gunfire again because the end of the war will be declared soon, as the foreign ministers of both countries are currently holding a meeting. He remarks that it seems like the Croizon guys had no intention of going for an all-out war in the first place. This one was only large in scale, but was basically a local war, no different from an annual event in the end. The knights wonder why the Croizon guys would do that in the first place and speculate that it's probably to strengthen their imperial power, as Adrian says it was the same in his past life, and that his nation really doesn't have any luck when it comes to relationships with neighboring countries. He asks about the vanguards that have been dispatched, to which Earl says that they'll have to continue the war game until it's officially over, to which Adrian inwardly says it's always the subordinates who suffer because of their superiors' decisions. Earl Otis tells him to relax, asking if he didn't receive a Golden Lion medal as spoils for the war, and that his rewards certainly won't end like this, so he should enjoy the moment until the war ends, which he agrees to, asking when he's ever been virtuous, and telling himself to just focus on the future instead of worrying, since he has to go back to his family once the war ends, so he needs to level up more. Billiam says he still thinks it's a good thing, asking what would have happened if their country and the Croizon Empire engaged in an all-out war, saying 100 sky fortresses and thousands of soldiers would have annihilated everything, and an unimaginable catastrophe would have taken place, to which Adrian says he should have taken some more rest and asks why he's here before offering him a cookie, which Billiam says must be precious considering Count Otis gave it before, saying that he already felt this before, but Adrian is truly different from other nobles. Not just feeling sorry for the sacrifices of his commoner soldiers, he would even keep guard of the command enter like this while his soldiers are resting, to which he inwardly says he'll obviously be different from the other nobles since he was a commoner in his past life as well, before Billiam says he possesses the composure and dignity of nobles at the same time, which Adrian says he'd go wrong, so he asked if he wasn't drinking back tea, even when he saw that the enemy troops were rushing in, and that that's impossible without having absolute trust in oneself, because of which the subordinates were also able to shake off their worry after seeing his composure, and that everyone in the 22nd Brigade completely trusts him. Hearing this, Adrian remarks that he knows what he's trying to say now and will bring up the fact that he'll fully support him to be the successor, so he starts reminding him about what he said last time before Billiam suddenly goes on his knees and says he's got trustworthy men around so that no one can come close and overhear them, in addition to which they've also checked for surveillance devices, so he doesn't need to worry, hearing which Adrian says he's serious says, and all of them are on his father's side before telling him that he knows they've taken precautions, but this kind of behavior might be a bit noticeable. But Billiam says that is why they came here when everyone was resting, and tells him that he, along with all the other knights, would like to serve him as their lord from today, which surprises Adrian before he agrees to it, but on the condition that they are to act normally until he says so. Billiam asks if he shouldn't immediately start gathering power since their forces are nothing to scoff at, but he says he has a plan and asks them to follow his orders, which he agrees to. He learns of the amount of knights they have before Billiam says Earl is planning to assign Sir Perseus to them, who is a very powerful warrior, meaning there is room for power expansion for them, so Adrian asks Billiam to arrange a meeting with him immediately. As he's leaving, he remarks that his top priority to clear the next Lucky Encounter quest and is going to form his 7th circle today. As Adrian lies on a pool of blood, he looks over at Arcia and Crowley's immobile bodies before a screen tells him that he has died and to try again after recovering his EXP. In-game, Adrian calls out to Arcia in panic, remarking that all this time while clearing the Lucky Encounters and reaching level 200, he never experienced death. It's normal to die and overcome struggles in a game, but if he dies here while sharing senses with his real-world self, the pain will be beyond imagination. Looking at Arcia struggling, he says she always stood still in front of their enemies but is getting pushed back right now, and that he always kept his safety first in every fight. Crowley swoops down on the enemy, but both he and Arcia get thrown aside as the Death Knight, Pascal, brandishes his sword at Adrian. Lying on the floor, he remarks that he isn't just an aura master, but also has a named boss quest buff and an abnormally strong body. Getting stabbed, he says this one is on a different level as the screen telling him that he's died appears and tells him that he'll get resurrected in a nearby village. Crawling in pain on a bench, he says he can't even express it since there's so many people around. Using the support resurrection tool, he brings back Arcia, who instantly apologizes, but he asks if she's okay, and if it didn't hurt her, to which she says it did, but her senses in the game are much lower than his, so she can hold it in. Adrian remarks that he recruited her without thinking because of her stats as a tank, but as he got closer to her, he was embarrassed hiding behind her small body and will try to change his fighting style. If she was enduring his pain, he'll have to change it at the end. Fighting the Death Knight showed him a clear limit to their combat style. Arcia blocks the enemy's attacks and Crowley blocks their sight or sneak attacks to distract them while he does massive damage from the back with magic. It's worked so far since they were over-geared, but it has a limit against enemies like Death Knight, who can constantly keep up with Arcia. The problem is the long time between each attack, because his casting time is delaying the main damage, which means the only way to keep enemies away between casts is Black Eagle's tackle. And since Arcia's defense worked against Black Knight, if there was one more in-out DPs that could support Arcia while he casts, their current combat style could work. The only solutions he can think of now are 3. The first is to use low circle magic so that he can reduce casting time and have a higher firing rate. Second is to use Black Eagle as an actual fighter instead of a hit and run support. And the third is that Arcia stops only using a shield and uses a sword as well for damage. The first one basically equals to limiting himself, so the only ones usable are 2 and 3. He decides on something, saying it won't be easy, but is at least worth a try. Returning from the second death against Death Knight Pascal, Adrian angrily wonders if this is even possible, and says this is his problem. This time he tried using Arcia and Black Eagle more effectively in the fight, but it's hard for it to face against Black Knight by itself since it died within a minute of the fight starting, after which he died within 3 minutes and Arcia followed after one more. The biggest problem in this fight was Crowley dying too quickly. It can't deal much damage to the enemy, but the distraction helps, which means that in order to keep their combat style, Black Eagle is a necessity. Wondering if he should make it a chest plate, he decides to try it since things that aren't working out now will eventually do so later, saying that this is just a test to reach the 7th circle. Returning after dying again in the 3rd battle, he says it wasn't too bad and did its job despite being made in a hurry. It allowed them to fight Death Knight longer, because of which they were able to see the pattern. In the 5th battle, Death Knight expresses confusion and asks if he's fighting a bunch of acrobats and asks why they haven't changed their style, to which Adrian says he'll introduce him to the human bomber and unleashes a flurry of attacks from above before eventually getting killed. As he tiredly faces it in the 9th battle, he says fighting it in the front line enabled them to live for 25 minutes, which means it's possible, but the biggest problem was dodging and attacking, deciding to try again with equipment more focused on reflexes than casting. Later, as he dies again, he says this is it. Despite dealing less damage, he was able to live for 62 minutes, because of which the others were able to attack more, making it so they were able to deal 84% damage to it and can do it if he keeps trying. Waking up on his bed, he sees that he reached the connection limit before remarking that it feels like the world's moving slower, to which Arcia answers that's because they died and resurrected so many times, due to which she also feels stronger, which can come only from experience, hearing which Adrian remarks that her responses are definitely not from artificially created homunculus, so she will be no different from a human being as time passes and she experiences more. Later in the 18th battle, they finally deal 100% damage to the Black Knight, who says they did well before disintegrating as Adrian triumphantly says they did it, and they complete the lucky encounter of their 7th quest. On the 8th floor on Manuel Lucas's tower, Adrian says the 7th floor alone was several times larger than the ones before it, but this is the size of a royal library, questioning how most of these decorations are made with game graphics before a voice tells him that they're all real. He quickly whips out his staff before Arcia says it's fine. He looks up wondering how she smiled before seeing an old-looking fairy. He questions if this is a new supporter, but wonders why it looks so familiar before recognizing it as Archduke Lucas in shock. The man, however, answers that his name is Chester, who is the manager of fate, and also a trace of Lucas, shocking Adrian. Chester adds that he's an artificial intelligence created by replicating Manuel Lucas's memories, to put it simply, hearing which Adrian warily says he encountered a being who's no different from his savior, even if it's a clone, and that his head is complicated rather than being happy. It'd be great if he showed in favor. But if Chester decides to go for the opposite, it'll be hard for him to respond, wondering if he's going to take back what he gave him. But Chester says there's no need to worry. Adrian says he doesn't seem like an artificial intelligence at all, since he's having an independent conversation, to which it says he may not have a soul, but he does have data consisting of that person's entire life, to which he says even if his body couldn't win against aging, his spirit still remains in the virtual world and is eternal life in a sense. Chester says it can be seen this way, which is also why Lucas created the Hollywood system in the first place, but this system isn't perfect, because memories that were turned to data may have deteriorated or lost in the transfer, on top of which they can't see him as an alive being since he exists as just a specter. Manuel Lucas thought that even if a clone memory had a consciousness, it wasn't his true self, so he wouldn't have wandered around in virtual space and would have created a homunculus if he was actually interested in memory duplication. Adrian asks Chester why he appeared, so he gives him administrative authority, with which he will be able to exercise authority over all programs, which Adrian reacts to in shock and says that means he can control all the information online since it's similar to Earth's internet. Chester says he has to adhere to 4 rules. Administrator privileges cannot be accessed to chronicle online. He's prohibited from accessing someone's brain. He's prohibited from stealing other people's property and cannot exercise authority that has a direct negative impact on the world. Adrian asks if he can launder the source of wealth acquired through fate, to which he answers that what he recommends him to do is to create investment and stock trading records in the online currency market, and the probability of detection is almost 0%, because it's about revising all the relevant information and making it appear as if it was completely based on real records. Adrian says Arcia needs a legitimate family registered and tells Chester to put her as coming from the holy city, Everhill, so he says he'll make her coming from a family that died, leaving her the only living member, hearing which Adrian says he's like the genie from the lamp, and asks Chester if his role is to give him administrative authority and help process it, which he agrees to. So Adrian asks why Archduke Lucas is going to this extent, so he answers that it's his way of expressing the fact that he's missing his hometown in consideration, so that he doesn't live a bad life as he did. Hearing this, Adrian says that doesn't sound like someone called great, and that if he weren't in this world, if he weren't an earthling like him, if he didn't leave his fate for a future generation, his life would be more pathetic than it is now, and he wouldn't be so bright. So he goes on his knees and thanks him, to which Chester answers that he isn't Manuel Lucas, but Adrian notices that the corners of his mouth seem to twitch slightly. Perseus asks Billiam if he's kidding, but he says he believes that the land will prosper under his rule. Perseus says he heard of his performance during the war, but is too small of an object to place his trust in. Billiam says he seems to believe that Adrian just got lucky, but that isn't the case, because what is known to the world is only the tip of the iceberg. He's personally acted under his orders and believes him to be one of the greatest geniuses of the century. Perseus asks what he wants, to which he says he wants him to persuade the vassals to side with Adrian rather than maintaining their neutrality. Perseus says he'd like to meet him first, so Billiam decides to give him a call since he was supposed to be arriving soon anyway, to which Perseus remarks that he'll have to see whether he is truly worthy to be followed for himself. They suddenly detect a strong 7th level teleportation circle being created before Adrian and Arcia step out of it, and she swiftly defeats 5 assassins, to which he says he didn't expect them to not be able to detect so many assassins, hearing which Perseus says he was too presumptuous, and that this isn't a man he can dare to figure out. Adrian repairs everything around them and tells them to not overthink it since they should move somewhere else before using a 7th circle spell to teleport them. In the Lewis Kingdom, everyone will say the name of Duke Kine Riverdale, a grand wizard and a teacher who successfully trained 6 7th circle mages. Everyone says the same. The greatest wizard of all time is Archduke Lucas, but the world's greatest instructor is Duke Kine Riverdale. Adrian tells Perseus that Duke Riverdale is his magic teacher but passed away a year ago, but he was able to learn without any problems under Anna's watch because the only place where he could act freely was the virtual world, inwardly remarking that this is all obviously a lie because anyone would doubt a 20-year-old suddenly becoming a 7th circle mage. But he's not just lying without any preparations because he has a platinum plaque and picture with him, none of which are real, but he asked Chester to make them to use as an alibi. Other than this, there are many traces of Riverdale and records of him having a secret disciple, so the Riverdale family or his other disciples would trust him if they find him. He tells the two that Arcia and him can take care of Cedric and Anna, so there isn't much need for them to expand their influence. Perseus asks what the reason for calling him is in that case, to which he says he didn't have any intention of letting him go and asks to see his left hand before touching their watches and opening his currency loot before sending 20 billion to Perseus. He says he wants him to create a group that will obey his orders and gather intel. The jobs they will do is dirty work, but it's a necessity in order to go higher and is cruel to ask a knight to take the job. Perseus agrees that they need a group like that since they are likely to go against Margrave Raven, but asks if he's sure since he believes it wouldn't have been easy for him to save that much money, to which Adrian says 20 billion is a lot but nothing for them to worry about since he has a talent for investing, inwardly saying that he'd faint if he was told that he has 300 times the amount. He says he's going to build a power that no one in the country dares to disrespect and asks if he's with him, to which Perseus goes on his knees and swears loyalty. Anna asks if 5 expert assassins disappeared without a trace, which the attendant agrees to, so she confirms if they didn't say that they wouldn't be taken down unless it was a grand wizard or aura master before throwing the glass at the attendant and asking where Billiam and Perseus are, saying the two would definitely be planning against her, which is why she should have watched over the situation more, but had no choice than to listen to him since things could have gotten worse if she pushed Raymond too hard. But if Billiam and Perseus will be unstoppable if they bond together. She can't let any competitors in Cedric's way, so this isn't the time to keep promises. She questions if she should just kill Adrian, remarking that this is the easiest way and that there isn't any need to think too hard about it. The attendant says there's no going back with Viscount Lawrence if she does that, and Adrian is getting everyone's attention, to which she coldly asks how long he's been working for him. She tells him that she hates to be lectured and asks if he thinks he's smarter than her, as the man inwardly remarks that he kept on going in remorse and asks for forgiveness because he just pitied the young master. She says he can frame himself, remarking that it's the son of the Viscount that's dying, so someone has to take the blame, so he did it as his way of showing loyalty without her knowing. The man looks at her in terror, so she asks if he doesn't want to, but he says he understands and will prove his loyalty. She says she likes the response and tells him to get it done this time because they will be the ones dying if they fail again. The man says she's throwing him away just because he misspoke after working for her for 30 years. It's too late to go back, so if the young master can overcome this, he can maybe find a way out, but there's no way he can do so. The commanders congratulate each other on the victory of the 22nd Division. Earl Otis says he's relieved that they can safely go back home and that he never thought he would receive recognition from Brigadier Lawrence, remarking that he's looking forward to the ceremony hearing, which the others thank Adrian as well, saying their place in their family went up and will surely become the next heirs, gratefully welcoming him to their homes, to which Adrian says this is normal since they are getting credit for what he did, so this is normal. But this wouldn't have happened if he'd taken all the rewards for himself, so he says this is all because His Excellency trusted him, to which Earl says it would have been better for him if the war had continued a bit longer and enabled him to become the Lord, but as it stands, his rewards will be limited to him. Adrian remarks that there's a big difference between inheriting a title and earning one, no matter how high of a rank he gets to. He doesn't have earldom and can't pass on his title. He tells Earl that he didn't fight expecting anything. He answers that he has so much potential but doesn't have the environment to fully express himself. Hearing this, Adrian inwardly says he'll be the rightful heir of his family once he pushes Cedric away. Earl says maybe he could get engaged into his family then. He has one daughter and can make it happen. Adrian wonders what's happening but thanks him and says he'll think about it, thinking of how his daughter is the one known to be a maniac. But it isn't his problem and doesn't matter because he can finally go back, telling Anna and Cedric that things they never could have expected are going to happen. The day after Reinhardt's and Crozen's war had ended, the provincial army was disbanded immediately. In-game, Adrian says he's getting tired and that the level requirement to challenge Lucky Encounter of quest level 8 is 250 and his current level is 202. It's been almost 10 days since he reached level 200, and it doesn't feel like he's progressing at all. He thought their compatibility had improved a lot since the battle with the Death Knight, but as they got stronger, the monsters got stronger, the EXP cap went up as well, so it's practically impossible to level up at least once a day like before. This isn't an individual problem, it's the party, a monster, that they just slew needs at least a party of 5 to kill it. He questions if he needs to find another party member, but decides that he can't do that since it's best to stay away from attention because he has Lucky Encounter. He can go slow and steady and eventually reach max level, deciding to take it as a lesson and a good experience. He's about to say that they should get going, but suddenly notices something odd with Arcia and asks what's wrong before Crowley lands behind him and hurriedly starts signaling something. He wonders if anything happened outside and logs out to see Arcia fighting someone. He hurriedly activates his great shield and she says they're assassins like last time. He asks when assassins started using force swords, to which she answers that she isn't sure about that, but they are armed with force armor and sword. He remarks that it's too clean here considering the fact that they were trying to assassinate him, so she says Sir Billiam was ready for anything and his vanguards are stalling the assassins. She says she doesn't think it will be that easy as they see 6 armored golems, and Adrian remarks that Anna changed her target from him to Billiam and Perseus. He asks if one force sword will be enough and summons Istro's sword and staff, telling the golem that it chose the wrong target and using flame blast, blasting it away before deciding to get going. As an assassin hears his comrades scream, he wonders how and says they should have been done by now according to the plan before an explosion occurs in front of them. Seeing this, he frustratingly questions why this kind of monster is hiding in the Lawrence family. Arcia swiftly slashes through the golems one after another as the assassins worryingly remark that they can't run away and tell each other to kill that Archmage since he's interfering with their communication, but someone answers that they can't because there's an Aura Master beside him before cutting off in a scream. The captain says he's going nuts, questioning if the Archmage wasn't enough since they got an Aura Master as well before deciding and hurriedly running away, telling everyone that they're all on there now. He suddenly gets immobilized before Arcia slashes his arm off and whips around to finish him, but Adrian quickly tells her to not kill him. He approaches the man and says there's no use trying to escape, hearing which the man fearfully questions if they were all completely annihilated. Adrian asks about what if they help each other before suddenly realizing something and telling Arcia to stop him as the man slowly droops towards the ground in pain. Arcia checks his neck and says he's dead, and that it looks like he chewed the poison hidden in his molar teeth, to which he says he didn't realize that this was really how assassins die since it only happens like this in novels. Since he doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with assassins, he took their determination a bit too lightly. He looks back at the vanguards and remarks that they're really noisy as the vanguards pester Billiam and ask if he was already aware of this and to please say something, so Billiam patiently tells them that young Master Adrian is Duke Riverdale's disciple. Shocked, they ask how that's possible since he must have been under strict surveillance all the time and spends almost all of his time playing games, so he says he was able to play in the virtual world without any restrictions, and said that his teachings were conducted between reality and virtual reality because the theory classes are also available online. They ask if it was just them that didn't know since everyone in the family looked down on him. Billiam answers that they all know how amazing Duke Riverdale is, but he thinks young Master Adrian was able to become like this because he's special. The young genius of Viscount Lawrence, who is said to have lost his intelligence after taking poison, has been making plans for the future, while lowering himself and deceiving everyone around him to ensure survival before saying that the tide has turned and that they surely wouldn't think of dying on a sinking ship, hearing which Adrian remarks that he's really good at influencing others, as Billiam tells the vanguards that they will arrive at the estate soon, so they should behave themselves so that they aren't a nuisance to the young master, which they passionately agree to. Upon arriving, Adrian's mother tearfully rushes forward and embraces him, asking if he was alright and confirming that he isn't hurt anywhere, but he asks her to please calm down because he's alright, as Raymond says he's worked hard, which Adrian thanks him for, inwardly remarking that it's perfectly normal to hold a parade in celebration of him receiving a medal on the battlefield, but it's too quiet. Raymond apologizes and says he should have given him a grand welcome, but he says he's okay since he isn't into noisy events anyway, thinking that it must be Anna or Cedric's doing, because nobody would really bother to hold a parade for someone who's going to die anyway, as Raymond says he's prepared a grand banquet for him in return, so they're going to celebrate with eating and drinking before Adrian turns and around and sees that the Sky Fortress is in energy-saving mode at the banquet. The commanders happily tell Adrian that it was a great honor working alongside him, and someone thanks him as well, saying he would not have been able to come back alive if not for him seeing, which Raymond says he has learned to win people's hearts on the battlefield, before Anna looks at him in shock. He turns around and says it's been 3 months since they last saw each other, to which she awkwardly welcomes him back. Looking at her angry face, he remarks that she looks like she's seen a ghost and wonders what's wrong with the attendant, Morris, standing behind her, remembering that he's heard that he's been working as Anna's hands and feet for the last 30 years, but seems to have a favorable impression of him. He suddenly notices someone walking up and says that person is at the center of Anna and Cedric's forces, Commander Crone, and as expected, a Knight Commander. His specs are excellent, but he can't believe his characteristic is authority-based management and not combat ability. Cedric tells Adrian that he's done quite a good job as someone who carries the last name of their family, and even though it's not that big of a deal, he should still compliment him, hearing which Adrian says he's going to push them into a swamp so deep that they can't escape it, and will strangle them in despair, but that doesn't mean he's going to tolerate all his actions. Cedric asks if it feels good getting complicated, so he asks if he really thinks he cares of his compliments and that it's ridiculous, that he's talking like he's achieved anything since he would have gotten everyone killed if he had led the soldiers into the battlefield. He says he's naive enough to regard his smile as being happy, which is why his vassals call him a moron and an imbecile. Cedric says him and Billiam are planning rebel instigation and orders the knights to capture them, but no one moves. Embarrassed, Cedric rushes forward to attack Adrian, but Arcia grabs his hand before smacking his face with a piece of meat, after which he immediately falls down.